Hello everybody, welcome back to JBS. From last week, where we left off, we looked at the pattern of the kingdom, and life was looking pretty good. God had created the world, He had put His treasured possessions, the treasured pieces of creation, humanity, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, and He said, enjoy all the blessings of this garden, but don't eat from this one tree in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was where we left off. And so now we're going to pick up and we're going to see where the biblical story goes from here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to read through Genesis chapter 3. So if you would like, just pause the video, take a little look through Genesis 3, and then come back and resume the rest of the video. Yeah, so it's a bit of an odd passage, isn't it? At kind of a surface level, we see conflict. There's conflict all throughout this section of the Bible. We see conflict mainly between this creature called the serpent and the woman, Eve. We see that there is this temptation that the serpent is doing. He is deceiving the woman into forsaking God, disobeying Him, and eating from this tree. And as we've seen, the temptation is too much for both of them. Both Eve and Adam make the choice to eat from this tree and disobey God in doing so. And this is really interesting because the conflict is not now limited to Eve and the serpent. It now includes a conflict between God and people, and between people and people. Note that when God comes and asks asks of the man, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? And the man says, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it, from verses 11 and 12. Upon the questioning, Adam immediately plays the blame game. And he just grabs Eve and says, this is the problem, and also your problem, God, because you put her here. There's conflict now between humanity, this serpent, and God. And this conflict is what we're going to see throughout the rest of the Bible. And this conflict is what we call sin. And it's a loss of relationship. So as Adam and Eve decide to reject God's commands, it is the same thing as rejecting God Himself. And so they do this, and as a result of that, God says, okay, if you don't want to be my people, then you won't be my people anymore. And so as punishment, He rejects them, as they have rejected Him, and He sends them out of the Garden of Eden, out of His blessing. And so this brings in a brand new kingdom that we're looking at, and this is the perished kingdom, right at the very beginning, Genesis chapter 3. We see the pattern of the kingdom has been destroyed. God's people, the people are no longer God's people, they are no longer in God's place, and God's blessing is no longer applied to them. Instead, as a result of this sin, God has judged them. And this judgment means that they are no longer His people. And actually, for the rest of this kingdom, God doesn't have any people. There's nobody here who wants to be a member of God's people. And God's place, the Garden of Eden, stays empty. And He actually places defenses there to stop people from entering. And God's rule, rather than being expressed in blessing, is now expressed in curses. 3 different curses, one for the serpent, one for the man, and one for the woman. And in this kind of tragedy, this tragic change of circumstances, humanity now has a fractured relationship with God. And in the rest of the perished kingdom, from Genesis 3 all the way to Genesis 11, we see that. We see this fractured relationship on all fronts. In Genesis 4, we see Cain and Abel, and we see humanity, human brothers against human brother. In Genesis 6 to 9, we see humanity against itself in the massive slaughter and evilness that has corrupted mankind. And in Genesis 11, we see all of human society united against God. And so this leads us into one big, massive question. What is going to be next? Is there a possible chance of salvation for humans? Is there someone who is good enough to be God's people? And we're going to look at that next week. We're going to have a look at the promised kingdom and at one particular man. We're going to leave it there.